Welcome to EduCast, a podcast about Catholic education and our community. Episode 1, Minecraft. Video games? In schools? My name is Danny Most. I'm your guest host today. I'm the manager of our Emerging Technology Department, and joining me to my left is Candace Salerno.
Hello, it's great to be here.
And to my right, Aaron Ball.
Hello, also nice to be here.
Off stage, stage right, we've got a couple of young students who are going to bless us with their wisdom, Tristan and Riley. Welcome, guys. We've got Paul McNeely over to our right, and our producer, none other than the famous Alan Au, who is celebrating a special day today. Alan,
it is video day.
Birthday. Happy birthday, Alan. Everybody,
Thanks.
Ready? No, just kidding.
Oh.
Thanks.
But any special plans for the day, Alan?
Obviously glad to get this podcast done. I'm actually really excited to get this podcast because it's, I think, one of the things that our district should be really get involved in. And then
Episode 1.
Going to talk about
Episode 1, and our first episode is called. So we've got a lot of interesting topics to talk about with the whole area of video games and education. So this is quite exciting. Aaron, you've been playing video games a long time. Tell us about
Very long
a little
time.
bit about your passion with video games. Where did you first start to kind of fall in love with games?
I remember going down to, I think it was the local Red Rooster, and renting a Nintendo Entertainment Center for like spring break with my buddy. And we would we'd kind of lock ourselves away in a room and stink it up and eat jalapeno chips. And I remember playing Dragon Warrior over spring break and completing that. It took us a week. That's kind of epic.
It's dedication.
It's very dedication.
Yeah.
Playing a lot of NES games. Mario, big fan of Mario, and starting off in that way, and never really thinking, always having that barrier growing up that video games it's not learning. Like, what a waste of time. And even in my own studies as a teacher, studying video games as education tools, and people going, like, why would you do that? That has no. How does that relate to real life and what they're going to do? So, well, we've got them now, don't we? Because they're great ways to learn. So
absolutely, we're going to uncover all those ways here. Thanks, Aaron. Alan, you love video games. What's I've even got a shot of your favorite classic video game up on the screen here.
Yeah, that's right. Oregon Trail. I remember grade 7.
Dysentery.
On an Apple IIe, and it's quite the old school machine. Like it was Apple's second machine ever made, and Oregon Trail is. I remember that game, and I thought, oh, this is a fun game. And basically, you gotta go across United States, and then I remember you had to pick a family, try to get the family across the whole country, and then this hunt, make sure the family survive, cross the river.
Which they generally didn't.
You get money, you can buy supplies.
Crossing that river, though.
Crossing that river, your wagon always.
Yeah.
So there's
Lost
certain
a wheel
elements of chance as well as planning that can go into it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Candace, how about you? Where did you first start playing
Well, definitely
games?
elementary school was definitely when I started playing video games as well, and it was usually a collaborative effort with my brother, and so we kind of occupied the basement. And my first video game was Super Mario Brothers, and so with Yoshi and Mario and Luigi, and I remember spending hours, if not days, playing this video game. It was just so engaging. And so that was really my first experience. And then it kind of just evolved into games such as Tetris on the Game Boy, and that was highly addictive. And then it just kind of evolved from there. And I know
Tetris.
Tetris, right? This infinite game that you cannot actually win.
Good times.
And
right?
you dream about it at night.
Oh, you do, and you dream about the music, right? And it's all these factors in these video games that you're kind of just hooked in a sense. And then it evolved. We became very much so connected with Zelda, and then it just kind of built from there. And I think it actually created a very lasting impact on us, and it defined really the foundation of who we are as consumers of technology, certainly as games.
Yeah. More participants.
Absolutely.
At a certain point than consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really, for my brother and I, it's really a way for us to connect still. It's this like shared collaborative experience that when we see each other, it's about games in a sense. Yeah.
Well, for me, and Alan, I've got a shot of my classic favorite video game. Oh, definitely. That was actually a sound from the game, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow.
Really?
My favorite game was
This is a throwback here. Throwback.
Yeah, you got to hear a little bit of this. This is just this is good TV, ladies and gentlemen.
Wowee.
Right. So this is Ultima 3 Exodus, and the thank you to the Elk Point Computer Club, where in my junior high days we would sit and we would not only play games like this, where it was the first kind of strategy game I've ever played, where you had different characters in your group and each had a different set of skills, and that one could heal someone, one could fight, and one could do things, and you went around collecting stuff and you could buy things, and it was a lot of choices, which I think was, as well as strategy, which was great. So even though we used our keyboards and entered yes or no or little numbers, that was not like our game controllers today, but it was definitely a lot of fun. And from there, we kind of launched into making our own video games. That's something we're going to talk about a little bit later as well. So let's hear from our young men. We've got a couple of young men here from HE Burial. We want to welcome Tristan and Riley. We're located in the beautiful HE Burial Junior High right now in the school's what is this room? Is this not your makerspace either? You've got another.
We do have a makerspace
room
in our school. That's in our library. This would be our, I don't know, computer lab, I guess, media lab.
Awesome. This is where the magic happens.
Yes.
Welcome, gentlemen. So we have Tristan and Riley.
Yeah.
So, gentlemen, tell us a little bit about your interest in video games. What are you playing right now?
Well, my favorite video game is Assassin's Creed. New on Unity. I think it's the best because most of the time I just do multiplayer because you can actually play with your friends then. But like most people think that Assassin's Creed is just like mindless violence, but actually it goes a lot more into like history, and like I would have probably failed social class by now if I hadn't played it, because like it goes into the Renaissance and like Italy and stuff. So yeah, it helps me out a lot.
Cool.
Awesome. How about you, Riley?
My favorite game is Evolve, the Evolve beta, but it has ended currently. But in Evolve beta, there were 4 players, 4 hunters. Oh no, 5 players. 4 of them were hunters, and there was a monster. And with this monster, you had to basically kill all of the hunters to protect your planet. But if you're the hunters, you have to eradicate the monster and to save people on the planet.
Sounds exactly like Ultima 3, my game from years ago, where you can. So you have some choices, and what's the goal of the game?
The goal of the game is, I think there's going to be a story for when the game does come out, but right now, when the beta has ended, it was only multiplayer.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, guys. And so you're not only are you playing video games, but even at school here, you're making games. Is that right?
Yeah.
Awesome. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's really good because like you can like make the games yours. Like most games out there, you always play them, and then afterwards you're like, oh, I wish this game had something like that. But here, you can make it so that you can actually have everything you want in the game. So you can really express your creativity.
Awesome. Do you have a name for your game yet? Are you still designing it? Or?
Well, me and a group of us made a game called The Motorcycle Man. And like, so it's basically about like a race of a motorcycle, and it's like, yeah, so you just have to race to the end. We have 4 levels. We're all working on one.
Well, so I guess I have a question. Why are you guys deciding to work together as opposed to by yourself and building your video game?
A longer game and more of a challenge to connect all of them and keep somewhat of a story.
Okay.
Now, what do you use to build the video game? Is it a website? Is it a piece of software?
Yeah.
Or what do you use?
We're using Kudu Game Lab.
Okay, Kodu. Yeah, I've heard of that.
Kudu.
Yeah.
Same difference.
So how do you control your game after you've made it? Is it
After that,
keyboard or is it
you can
mouse?
use the keyboard, or you can use Xbox controller like USB.
All right.
That one specifically.
That one specifically.
That
there it is.
The one, yes.
Got some great
That's
props
right.
here.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Alan, you ever try out Kodu or any of these other
No,
game
actually,
development tools?
sounds pretty interesting building video games because, you always think that it's like a multi-million-dollar corporation, bunch of group of people just building all these games. But I never thought like kids can actually build them. Like what do you guys really get into? Why do you get into video games? Like, how come you kind of like it?
Yeah, good question.
It's fun. There's challenges. And some games you can play with your friends, which is just a perk to playing them.
Absolutely. So it becomes a social experience for you guys, hey?
Yeah.
So it's like you get together and you play video games, but you could also, socialize or chat or whatever as well.
Nowadays, you don't even have to be in the same room.
That's right. That's right. And that certainly has evolved since our days of gaming as well, where we actually had to physically be in the same living room or basement or whatever and actually play games. So you guys can play games and say, hey, you want to join me at 2 o'clock? We're going to play whatever game. Nice. So what makes you decide on a particular video game to play?
Well, it depends what your interests are, really. Because, I don't know, if you're, really creative, then you can play games like Minecraft and, make your own world. Mm-hmm. But if you want more adrenaline, then you play games like Call of Duty or whatever to get excitement, there's shooting and everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great.
Awesome. So how did this start with your students making Kodu games in school? Is it a club? Is it during class time, or how does
Absolutely.
Where did it start for you?
For me, it started with the discussion as of last year with our principal, and we kind of just decided that gaming was a really pivotal part of our students' lives. We knew that they were playing a lot of video games at home, and so in discussions, we decided how are we actually going to take this interest and actually transplant it into our school culture, and so. On Thursdays during Flex Day last year, we started with just starting to introduce some of these programs, Scratch, Kodu, even our Raspberry Pi kits to our students, and then it evolved into actually developing an option for our grade 8 students, and so learning the basics of computing science, but also through that experience, they're actually building their own video game, which perhaps for them they might actually aspire to do something like this as a future career, but at least they have the foundation of it takes more than just simply creating the landscape, but there's actually programming that goes behind it, the backdoor process of actually understanding how in fact these games are created.
Yeah, so I know when I first started making video games way back in the day, not quite even as fancy as the Ultima game, it was I was literally typing, code on my
Absolutely.
very basic stuff.
Yeah.
Literally, it was called AppleSoft Basic, but it was very basic stuff, text entry stuff, and it was pretty boring. Now your Kodu, it looks pretty amazing. Do you have to actually learn code to type in, or how does it work?
It's one of the best parts because it's so easy. You can go it's when and do programming, so you can just go when, say,
and it's visual too, right?
Yeah. So when arrow keys do move, so it's basically pretty easy.
Okay, so yeah, visual commands. You can drag certain elements out onto your screen and
Yeah, and they actually talk about, in the research, they talk about how these programs have evolved, certainly since your day, and then even 10 years ago, where students had the ability to actually construct their own video games. And so the programs that exist today, there's kind of a 3 requirements that allow students without a teacher to actually instructing them to a certain degree of programming. So they talk about how these programs need to have a high ceiling, so it's easily accessible, wide walls where they can do many aspects with it, and they also is a low floor, so anyone can actually access this kind of programming. So programs like Scratch, Kodu, Alice, Game Salad. There's tons of these game construction programs.
Game Salad.
Yes.
That's what we're having for lunch tomorrow, boys.
There's tons of these programs out there that students can access and use, and it kind of is a nice way to just jump feet first into the actual programming aspect and learn quite a bit by just getting in there and doing the actual experience, as opposed to students 10, 15 years ago where they had to, it was more arduous or tedious in that aspect.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. We really appreciate your input. I'd like to actually bring in now Mr. Paul McNeely, teacher in our district. He actually also did a project with several projects involving video game design. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, guys. That was
Good
awesome.
luck with your video gaming.
For sure. See you tomorrow.
Don't forget us when you're famous. So yeah, that's exciting.
Really
computing
exciting.
Science classes. Now, have you convinced any other teachers to try to bring this into their subject areas yet? Or
yes, I think it's become a natural part. It's fine to have it as an option and allow kids to experience, but I think the true potential is really finding ways to integrate it into the curriculum, integrating into math, social studies, etc., and then really elevating the curriculum and also the experience for students. And when we think about students constructing video games, often they'll spend countless hours, 10, 20, 30 hours actually constructing these games.
Yeah, they
so you think
get
about
lost, don't
Yeah, they get lost. They have these flow moments in a sense, right? But you think they're actually connecting to that curriculum while they're building their game for 20, 30 hours. And so not only are they creating this game, but they're also thinking deeply about the curriculum. So really that's really the cherry on the top in a sense of these kids building video games because they're thinking about the content for such prolonged periods of time. So there's huge potential in connecting with the curriculum.
Is there like a storyboarding process, or like how does that evolve? I guess different types of games have different things.
And really it depends on the teacher and their perception of how they want to integrate it into the classroom. And I think Paul definitely has some insight about how this could be potentially integrated into the class.
Welcome, Paul.
Yes.
You've done several different things with your students. You've had your students using Minecraft. Is that right? Tell us a little bit about the project and how it started.
Well, with Minecraft, we're experimenting right now. I view Minecraft more as it's the tool that's driving the process. So the kids know Minecraft, they love it, they're hooked on it, and I'm using that to sneak in the process outcomes I want in my social studies program. So we're looking at different, with grade 6, we look at Athenian government with direct democracy, we look at the Iroquois with consensus, and then the representative government we have now. So what we're doing with the Minecraft is they're going to go into the Minecraft environment in phases, and how they work together as small groups and as large groups is driven by the decision-making model they're using prior to going in. So that will affect how they interact with each other within the Minecraft world. And they're given tasks they have to complete. And how they complete it and how they decide how to complete it is driven by the knowledge they have about the different decision-making models.
Sounds complex.
It has the potential to be somewhat chaotic, but also learning is messy, so you got to open that.
Now you've worked with both Minecraft and Kodu. What are the...
Before we do anything, like what is Minecraft? Like I've seen the game, I might have played for maybe.
I like to think of Minecraft as digital Lego with an unlimited supply of blocks.
Wow.
Absolutely. And really like an open box kind of system, right? When we think about Lego, traditional Lego, when you bought it, you would just be able to make whatever you possibly wanted. Like the Lego that comes in today's formats, right? You're kind of given a recipe and you have to follow it very specifically. So it's not like old school Lego in a sense. So kind of Minecraft is like a throwback to, the older version of Lego where it was very much so open box learning, right? As opposed to...
I would say it's also newer now because the new Lego kits come with all these custom pieces that you didn't even imagine existed 30 years ago.
That's right.
And so you've got all that now as well. I've got students... their current task right now in one of my exploration groups was to build a hockey arena that could seat 8,000 people. So I said, all right, let's go. So they put in an ice surface, they put in dressing rooms, and I thought those would just be easy to build. They have put in, there are pressure pads that open doors and lockers that self-clothe the players in their gear. And one of them has devised a system where when you score, a red light goes on top of the net. I had no idea this was remotely possible, nor would I have the knowledge or skills to do it, but they do. So in some cases, it's a matter of getting out of their way.
And you started this as a club, right?
Yes.
So that's not a bad way, actually, for schools that are a little bit unsure about those, biting off a lot and taking a lot of their curriculum time for this. I think starting off as a club has its merits. Would you agree?
I have 12 kids going right now, and the nice thing is these are the ones who are eager, excited, and know more than I do. So they're helping me find the pitfalls. So when I take in my other ones, when I take in my class of 29, I'm aware of some of the holes and the problems, and I know who my experts are. And so it's not me having to lead this, it's me and 12 other Minecraft experts who are going to help me work our way through this.
Absolutely. And that really is an initiative that just doesn't happen necessarily in one school. It happens in many schools. There's something called a computer clubhouse where really these kind of initiatives, students using Minecraft or programs like Scratch or even just video production, it really starts as a club and then it kind of evolves and transcends within the school community and it becomes a part of classroom learning. And so there is actually something called, it was initially sponsored by Intel. I don't know if they're still sponsoring, but it's actually called Computer Clubhouse. And that's a great way to kind kind of frame it within the school. Kids come and they experience the use of emerging technologies such as Minecraft, and then it will kind of evolve into the actual school community through curricular applications. So I think it's a really powerful way to start the use of these kind of things.
And just as one more thing, because Minecraft is so popular, and I have a waiting list of kids, they have a deadline. So we're running this in 4-week chunks. So there's some motivation to get this done, so you can show off to the other group. So because there's different tasks per different group coming in. So this is not an unlimited goes forever. There are real world deadlines. I've said, all right, by the end of this period, you have to have this done.
And did you give them a specific framework that they had to build, or was it pretty open for them?
Their task was well, that's interesting. Their class was to build a hockey arena that could seat 1,000 people.
Right.
And then as we developed, we had one teacher who is, I'm not going to say anti-technology, but definitely, maybe not as willing. And she walked by and she said, "Where's your bathrooms?"
We need these voices.
Yes.
Instantly, I had one boy say, pragmatic. "I know how to build a shower." The two others were going to go work on the bathrooms, and it just...
You raised a really good point about the digital nature of the designing. Obviously, with video games, it has to be digital, but even designing anything, that when you can work in a digital space and play with variables in real life, you can really address, in real life, imagine building a building like that with no bathrooms. I think I just saw something in the news a couple of days ago about a footbridge in Calgary, right, where they designed it, but it didn't fit in real life, and looks like they should have done a little more digital design.
You know what?
Absolutely.
We had a perfect case of this where a couple of students went off and decided they were going to build the roof, and they built a spectacular roof, and realized they only covered the ice surface, not the stands.
Back to the drawing board.
So they started, and one person caught it.
Yeah.
And then it was, all right, let's take apart what doesn't work.
Absolutely. And really, when we think about these technologies, I think it's a great way to think of it as they're objects to think with, right? And so the process that comes along with these objects to think with, that your students would never have figured out, or maybe never come to the conclusion that this roof wouldn't have fit. But because they've had the experience to build and construct while actually experiencing it, they get to say, okay, I'm going to build a little bit, and then bam, it doesn't work. So now I have to go back, and very systematically, they're going to find a way for it to work. But there's nothing that will actually stop them from figuring that out, because they know that there is the potential in there. And so really these technologies are objects to think with.
Well, it's instant feedback.
Absolutely.
Without the crushing defeat of having...
Yes.
If it works or not.
That's right.
Exactly, but also
that's
not.
The feedback.
But taking it apart isn't the end of the world, because it reassembles so quickly.
Absolutely.
As well.
And really thinking about the problem solving that comes along when we think about our skill outcomes within the curricula, like what fabulous problem solving experiences students have to get immediate feedback, go back, figure it out, and then have many different strategies to actually get to that end result.
And one of the really nice features of the Minecraft EDU version that we're using is I have the ability to freeze them. So
freeze the students?
Freeze the students. So I'm basically
it's winter here. We're always frozen.
I'm basically more the project coordinator, so I can stand back, and when I see that the group is falling apart or they're just moving in, they're not all rowing in the same direction, I can freeze them and say, all right, real
they
time.
Stop in their tracks.
Go to the whiteboard. Drop a plan, figure out what you're doing.
It's a nice feature to have.
And is that not the defining feature of a 21st century teacher, right? Or really, when you refer to yourself and your role and the ways that you're approaching this education, is that not how we're restructuring to really education to fit these project-based, learning experiences?
And it's those teaching moments too, where you can stop and to say that we're facilitators, I think, is not true, because we do teach. We are expected to.
Of course.
I like the term activators.
And that's one of those things where. But the nice thing about the Minecraft is you have the ability to sit back, and if it's going sideways, one click and they're stuck.
Absolutely.
And then, neat that there's a Minecraft EDU period. Obviously it's geared for
it has some nice
education.
features.
Absolutely.
It's also fun watching that sort of 5 to 7 second moment where they don't realize they're frozen. And you hear the mice go,
wait, I need my computer.
Oh, very much.
Good luck trying to get their attention, though, if you don't have that feature to be able to have them pause. Alan, what do you think? I'm hearing, I know with your background with media creation, I'm hearing it sounds like it would be a similar process in a way. Would you agree with that, or how do you feel about that?
It definitely sounds like it. Like I just quickly searched on YouTube, and this gentleman just built a gigantic mechanical calculator on Minecraft.
Wow.
And I was just like, well, obviously, people think Minecraft is just a game that you just built, it's just like almost like a design
purposeless
game.
yeah
But it's like this guy built this giant calculator that cogs and pegs, I guess, move around, and then you just punch in your numbers that you want.
Wow, he built like a machine.
Yeah, basically you just built a virtual machine.
Yeah.
And this alone shows like a lot of potential thinking that you have to do, because obviously there's no schematic. They just basically copy to Minecraft, and it's like, oh, there's your calculator. You actually physically have to build it on this virtual space.
And the other neat thing about the YouTube aspect of this is I have students who go home and teach themselves how to do certain aspects.
Absolutely.
And then bring it back
Yes.
to do this.
Yeah.
The other advantage of the EDU version is you don't have to start from scratch. You can go on there, you can pick up pre-made worlds that have you halfway there. Or
it's important.
There's one world that I'm using that I really like when I'm putting my students in. It's already got sections of this world walled off. So if you want to have small groups doing stuff, they're not cross walking over somebody else's stuff or breaking stuff. They're limited to their own zone, yet they're all within the same world.
And I think you make a really interesting point with the whole community aspect, right?
Yeah.
I know my experience with Minecraft and interacting with students with Minecraft is there's have such a correlation between building in Minecraft and then finding resources to help them, right? YouTube seems to be the big resource for students, and they watch. They can spend hours.
Big money hosting their own YouTube channels on Minecraft.
Yes, and it's actually fascinating just to watch kids watch these videos. Yes, because
celebrities.
Really, and
right.
and the kids know, and when they chatter about Minecraft, they know all like, oh, have you watched this person's video, and have you seen this? And so it's really fascinating that they not only feel empowered to actually build in Minecraft, they also feel very empowered to go seek out information, and that really
contribute to that body of knowledge in the world too.
And in my research, they talk about them as infinity spaces. So a place where students come together and share knowledge about gaming, and so they're either a forum or a YouTube channel, and so it's this collective agency that create increased capacity about gaming. And so gaming doesn't just happen in the game, it happens in so many other facets. So it's really a community experience in gaming and certainly game building.
And I would just like to point out, I'm a non-gamer. Most of my gaming experience involves solitaire. But I don't need to be a gamer to do this. My experience with Minecraft was my son on his iPad and occasionally checking in on that. It wasn't until I investigated the EDU version that I became more aware of what's out there. I still have no idea of the volume of different pieces that they can build with, and I don't have to be. As a teacher, you don't have to be the tech mentor or tech expert in the school to even start this.
So where would you start? I mean, Minecraft sounds like, you mentioned Lego.
Yep.
Kodu sounds like a board game. The difference between a board game and if you're a teacher, does it matter where you start or how you start?
I would start with Minecraft because I think it's the most beginner friendly. And all your students,
chances are your students
will have heard of it, and the few who haven't done it will pick it up really quick. So that is in my limited opinion, that is, as a non-gamer, that was the easiest for me to wrap my head around and get rolling with, especially if you're a school that has a robotic system in place or you've got Lego in the building anyways. You're going from a physical Lego to a digital Lego. It's an easy transition. But I think Kodu offers a larger potential for growth than Minecraft does. Because the element of Kodu is nothing exists in there unless you choose to put it in. Minecraft, you are reacting to the world that is there, and you're building within the world that is there. Kodu, you have to make a conscious choice to have everything there. And that's a whole higher level of thinking.
You agree with that?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, you've done a lot of research in this area too.
Yeah,
Talk to us
absolutely.
a little bit
Yeah,
about...
well, we know that allowing students to build video games is a really powerful learning experience. We know that they can achieve higher order thinking. We know that it meets their participatory culture needs, where they, a participatory culture, our students are defined within it, so they need to be given opportunities to build and construct. So when you think about Wikipedia, we not only just read it, we not only consume it, but we also want to participate in it by adding. And so the same can be said about these game construction programs. So either Minecraft is better than Kodu, or Kodu is better than Minecraft, or these other programs. I think they just provide a great opportunity to just start. So wherever you feel like you would like to start in building and constructing games, certainly maybe it has to do with your students, maybe it has to do with their passion, but I think it's for us as educators, we want to just give the opportunity to start building these games. Certainly in my experience, I have more experience working with programs such as Kodu and Scratch. I can see the power because it starts to teach them about programming. It starts to kind of open the doors to computing science. And certainly being a female, it's very important for me to lead other girls interested in exploring building video games and understanding basic programming, so that perhaps they might go into computing science, because we know that there's such a lack of girls going into that field of study. And so when we think about it, there's not as many girls and females building programs. And so that aesthetic, that aspect of our understanding is limited. It's not impacting in software development and game development.
Well, the programming world, I think, is hearing that cry for more females.
Absolutely.
You hear about girls coding clubs.
Yes,
I know that Hour of
exactly.
Code, there was a great deal of participation.
Absolutely.
Worldwide as well as our district. And I think that a large percentage of girls are participating in these activities.
Absolutely. And so maybe this is the start, right? Maybe introducing programs like Minecraft and Kodu will be the beginning of, kind of changing the imbalance that exists within game development and software development, for sure. I certainly hope so, because, I certainly hope so.
Now, you learned a lot from your research about video games and having students build video games.
Absolutely,
Can you share any of that?
I think certainly Paul was able to, when in his own experiences is using Minecraft and Kodu, certainly addressed a lot of these aspects. But certainly we know that they are objects to think with. We know that students have the ability to think deeply with it and will lead to higher order thinking. So I think that's a really important basis to understand. We also know that students need to be given opportunities to create, to construct, and making that curricular connection is really important. So connecting with math, connecting with science, and allowing students to create these experiences is really important. And some of the research has said kind of, well, how would a teacher actually begin this process? Where would they start? And certainly selecting the type of software is important, but there's something called an input process outcome model that kind of defines students building video games. And so what kind of instructional content are you going to put into the actual experience? So it's kind of that front loading of information at the beginning for a teacher. How am I going to design? How much time am I going to give my students? How am I going to actually get them to build this video game? Am I going to get them to write a story? Am I going to get them to storyboard? Am I going to get them just build and play? Am I going to front load all the knowledge at the beginning and then
provocation of some kind?
Exactly. So it's really that process, and it has to fit within your own pedagogy, of course, your own process. And then of course it's that, how much time do I actually give my students to actually build the video game? And then it's, what do I do with these video games at the end, which kind of follows that 3-step process in actually constructing and thinking about them. And I think that the most powerful aspect of these video games is really the play aspect of the end, where students have gone through the process. They've, maybe they've written a story, maybe they've created a storyboard, now they've created these games, and then what do they do with these games at the end? They get to play each other's, they get to play maybe the year before's games that they've experienced. And so and like we talked about before, the number of hours that a student plays and makes a video game, they're thinking deeply with that content, and that really is a powerful aspect.
So do you guys think playing video games and designing video games, is it helpful to kids, let's say career-wise in the future?
Absolutely, I certainly think so. Certainly how we talked about it, it gives them that beginning aspect, or beginning understanding of what computing programming looks like. I think that certainly is a basis to it, and maybe just validating that there are other ways to use technology, and maybe validating that games do have a place within the classroom certainly can be an interesting place to start. And there's also some other interesting research that talks about how it kind of motivates boys in their own writing and their own written literacy. So it gets boys to start thinking about, maybe if I write a story, I can also create it within a video game. So that's highly motivating for boys, because there are some boys we know certainly in our district, that struggle with getting into the whole writing and reading process. So it's another form of narrative that can be highly motivating for our students.
Whether we know that there is a huge shortfall moving forward over the next several years for computing science students, females, males, in general, the world is going to be short of many hundreds of thousands of programmers that'll be needed. But aside from that, what appeals to me is it's all about learning to control the world around you. I mean, I've seen these videos of these. Alan, I've got one up on the screen here. They've got these robotic, almost Terminator-like robotic creatures, and you see the futuristic world in certain movies where the robots will take over. And even now we're seeing so much more of our homes, having technology automated, and as we move forward, people have wearable technology,
of course.
Fitbits and the Apple Watches coming out and so on. I like
analytics,
the whole aspect of having every child, every student learn how to take control of the world around them. And coding and programming is going to be a part of that world. And that many would feel like it's a basic literacy.
And this doesn't have to be separate from your from your curriculum, from what you're teaching.
It can't be.
We did with my class, we did a coding project, and we made sure it was linked into language arts, math, health. Like, you can't pick just one, but it was an integrated project. And if nothing else from those, they left, or not they left, but they finished our project even as more critical thinkers about the games that they're currently playing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. I think that's really an interesting point, because when students actually are building their own games, they start to reflect what in fact constitutes a good game, what in fact creates that actual dimension. I think it also, when we were talking about the aspect of games and how can we integrate them into the classroom and what is the future, I think it's important that we kind of see technology maybe in three different ways, and I see it. And somebody, Taylor, he wrote a book about games in the classroom in 1980, and I think this classification still fits really well. He talks about computers either being a tutor, so they're telling you exactly how to use the technology, so it's essentially like a tool that just gives you information. And then there's the classification of a computer being a tool, so I use it like PowerPoint or Word. And then he uses this third classification as being a computer being a 2T, so it's actually I'm now in control of the computer. And I think as we evolve and think deeply about these technologies, I think we need to allow students to be the 2T, so that the student is actually in control of the technology. And to think that this person wrote this in 1980, and we still haven't really actually realized this in education, where we're definitely in this tool aspect, where we're still using them very much so as tools, but to think that through programs like Minecraft and Scratch and Kodu, these game construction programs, that students are actually telling the computer what to do as opposed to the computer telling them. And I think that is a very prominent aspect of where we want to lead in the future.
I think the hardest part of that is, if you're going to bring something new in, and we should, you have to be willing to let go of something else. You have to be willing to let go of, I know I've done this for the last six years, and I know this works, and that might not. Well,
absolutely.
That's a risk you got to be willing to take.
And I'm sure, Paul, and certainly my experiences with the games as well is that they are very time consuming, right? That's certainly something to be cognizant. So by integrating, creating that cross-curricular application is pertinent. You have to have that, because they do take time, right? And you have to give time to the students for them to explore, for them to have that freedom. Otherwise, it won't be successful.
And yet, the other aspect of that is give them significant blocks of time, but also give them targets.
Absolutely.
I'm going to give you 2 hours to do this instead of this half-hour block. We aren't going to do a half-hour Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but we're going to do it all morning Thursday. But by the end, here is your targets.
That's right. because kids can get lost in the details, right?
Yeah.
They maybe aren't mature enough, or they just can't be globally aware of, how to actually set their own markers. I think that's a really prominent
and I think
aspect.
project-based learning is a big part of this,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
we're really seeing a huge resurgence in the project approach.
And if you are a project manager in the real world, wherever you break up project down. We need to have this done first, this done here, this done here, and the real world functions to deadlines. And so we're bringing some of that real world learning. These kids can go home and say, "Oh, I'm behind on my deadline for here," and they may have a parent sitting across the table and say, "So am I." I have to have this deadline here, or else this penalty kicks in on my contract at work. Yeah, I have to have this deadline done at school, or this consequence kicks
Absolutely. Yeah.
And speaking of which, like people think coders, people who program games and stuff, just punching codes all day. But people don't think because games want to get more realistic, like photorealism that interacts in the world. And one of the things I was just looking up, and it's basically it's a water simulation. So basically, you gotta know your physics.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like this is not, tell computers I want water.
This is real world
This is real world application. Like you gotta know your physics. You gotta know your programming.
Yeah, you have to know your math.
You gotta,
absolutely.
and look at how realistic this water is.
It's amazing.
And I think the other aspect
it's a really good point, Alan.
that worked really interesting for my students was before we started this, I said, guys, it's going to be about 3 hours off the computer for every 1 hour on it. And they all just assume we're doing this project, jump on and go. Well, what's the research behind it? What are you looking for? What are you creating? What are you talking to each other? There's still a large element of taking a piece of paper and just getting yourself organized before you jump in. And so by the time we got to the end of it, one of them looked back and said, "You know what? You were right. We spent about 3 weeks working on this, getting ready to do the project, and then we did about a week building the game." And sometimes we lose sight of the fact that a lot of these elaborate games we see, you don't see the hours and weeks and years of research and talking.
For sure.
And I don't think any of them work in isolation anymore either.
No, not at all.
BioWare is one of the biggest game developers on the planet, and they're based out of Edmonton. And they've got huge meeting rooms where they still go and meet face-to-face and talk. And when we talk about 21st century, it's not just the tech, it's the learning how to grab each other's skills and make each other better.
Yep.
Love it.
Awesome.
Thank you, Paul McNeely.
Thank you.
I'd
Thanks,
love to get
Paul.
Aaron Ball's perspective on this. I know he's been involved. He's done a lot with video games and education.
Yeah.
Aaron, do you have your students play games?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Paul was just talking about BioWare, and one of the very first experiences I had was I used the Neverwinter Nights tool set, the Aurora tool, to create a video game for my grade. Those were grade 5 social students.
Back in the day.
And it was around an Inuit legend that I wanted them to experience. So I used the tool set, and I created this game. It was hours and just hours of planning. And I don't think I'd do it again. But it was a great experience for them, and they stumbled through the storyline, and they were able to experience it in a different way. Now,
Deep thinking.
yeah, really deep and really fun. Just a completely different way than me standing up there and monotone. This is the story, and it was completely different. Now I use some kind of drill and kill games in my classroom because we're still doing multiplication. So I've got one of my favorites is Multiflyer, and I think that's on Brainormous, I think .com, and it's a great way mechanically to allow my students to practice those drill skills that they need to.
Absolutely.
And because
and if they can have fun while they're learning, those important skills that we know still exist.
Super important skill, but not usually a fun one to learn, right? So, see, I think of Multiflyer right away when I think of video games that I do with my students. Just recently, harkening back to Minecraft, in my own students, we've talked about our classroom learning environment and how we want to reshape that environment. And the first step that we did is I had my students, this is on Minecraft on the iPad, they went in and they redesigned our classroom exactly what it looks like now. And so their desks were the work tables, and they had me, I was a creeper of course, and they had me locked in a cage in the corner.
He said it, folks, not me.
It's true.
Let the record show.
And then after that we started to talk about, okay, well, if we move some of these desks out. Where are you going to keep your stuff? And what does that look like if we have beanbags over there? And yeah, we can spill out into the hallway, but how is that going to affect how we're learning and how I have to come and get you? So that was a really neat one to get them to reflect on that, and starting to get them to think about how they learn, how they act in the classroom as well, and the kinds of things that they want to do.
Well, to design, you come back to it again, to design and to make something, you really do need to understand it. And it forces you to do that deeper inquiry into how things really work. I know John Carassa, whom I work with, had his grade 5 students, when he was in the classroom, using Kodu, they built a wetland ecosystem. Well, you need to know. So whether, Alan, it's your, the animation of the water and the characteristics and properties of water, which I think are even present to a more rudimentary degree in Minecraft, right? Kodu, yeah. Or whether it's creating a wetland or historical event in Kodu or something like that, you really do need to have a deep understanding.
Yeah, and they talk about how often when you play video games, there's this projective stance that comes from it. So they talk about, so let's say if I was playing Full Metal Spectrum or some sort of war game, I actually embody the skills that maybe a soldier would have. And then I start to understand what, in fact, the life of a soldier might have.
And that's a really good example of that genre, because that's a very close game to what you get shot once and you're dead.
Exactly, right? So just those kind of experiences that you have when playing a game, you actually embody it and you become familiar with what is it like to actually be somebody in this game. And so I think that's a really important thing. So when you're being a game designer or a game builder in Minecraft, you're not only learning about how to actually build this game, but you're also learning what it's like to maybe live in this world, right? Maybe in a calculator or whatever that is. So that projective stance is pivotal.
On the same tone, there's also mistakes in games that are great for reflecting on. So I think of SimCity, and I don't know, I haven't played any of the recent SimCity games, but in the old SimCities, if you raised the taxes, all of a sudden on the little sidewalks, you'd get people protesting, and that was always a great jumping off point, because then you talk with your students like, you know what? Does that actually happen in Edmonton? Do people go out and picket when Mayor Mandel, when he raised the taxes before, and was that something that ever happened? And no, that's not really what happens. But it allows you to have a lot of phone calls. Yeah, a lot of phone calls.
Absolutely.
So it's always interesting to bring that back up and talk about the mistakes that are built into the games.
Yes, absolutely.
So I like that reflection piece too.
Yeah.
So it's like simulation, like SimCity. Is it a actual good educational tool?
I guess one of the it depends, because video game developers aren't teachers and they aren't curriculum designers either. Yeah. So when they design an app, they aren't really thinking about, how is this going to affect student learning? No,
not at all.
So I've talked with, I remember speaking with a speech pathologist, and it was around an app on the iPad, and it was teaching a specific phonetic structure to, I can't remember what the vowel was. And she was listening, she was like, well, that's not what it should be like. Who made this? And I said, well, an app designer did. Well, they shouldn't be allowed to. I said, well, you know what? Yes. They did, and that doesn't mean they had your expertise.
But I think, for game designers, they've definitely hit on something very profound. Like, how do they, when we think about our students playing video games at home, they play for hours. And so they've hit on something very profound, that they've somehow figured out that some of the good things that they've integrated in many of the games, such as The Sims or Civilization or Full Metal Spectrum, they somehow have found something that really motivates and highly engages our students, and then translated into a learning experience where Tristan was able to understand the Renaissance through his own experiences, right, playing Assassin's Creed. So they've kind of somehow, they might not be educators, but they've definitely understand what it takes to actually make something motivational. Wow. Right, and we know that education, in order for anybody to learn, they have to be motivated.
So somehow it is default that these games are just realistic, and it is just useful for us to use. Like I know with like SimCity or The Sims, Will Wright, the original.
Who also did the score.
More or less the head of the company.
Yes,
I don't think he's in the company anymore, but
he was a designer.
He was a designer, and he started slowly. He started SimCity. He wanted to do Spore, and then he brought up Sims and games like that. He just I know I was reading one article about when the Sims came around. Before the game was made, he was saying that he got inspiration from his daughter and how the daughter interacted in real life, and he thought it'd be a good game to make. So he created to make Sims.
Yeah.
And Sims was kind of funny because he said he brought it to the board of directors in his company, and they're like, why do we want a dollhouse game? And then he kept pushing it, and they finally published it. And it's actually the biggest selling game for 6 years.
Absolutely.
Sims 2 came out, and that was another biggest selling game.
Yeah.
And and all he wanted was just to show like real life. So whether it's like SimCity or The Sims and games like that, it was just kind of neat that somehow that all kind of fall into place. It's actually could be useful for education and classroom and stuff.
Absolutely, and some of these commercial video games certainly do have a place within the classroom as well. And we sometimes don't think of it. We often are framed within like the educational, what are serious games, right? So the games such as Oregon Trail that we talked about earlier, right? Or the games that are framed within like Brain Pop, right? Those are often decided as like, well, those are educational, but there also is a lot of commercial games that were never thought to actually exist in a classroom.
They hit a lot of our curricular outcomes.
Like we think about Civilization, like there's huge connection with social studies. Sims can certainly, I think of as health as a huge connector.
I just had, as I was finishing up my my flight unit with my grade 6s, Simple Planes came out, and it's a physics based flight simulator. So you build your plane and you put the engines and you make sure that your wingspan and depth, and you've got to build the plane. And if you don't build it right, it crashes. Like, it's not going to work.
And you don't need a teacher to tell you it's 82% or a B plus or something. I mean, you get instant feedback like that Paul referred to earlier, right? You know if it works or if it doesn't work, and you need to go back to the drawing board.
And again, you're highly motivated to learn, right? Because of those embedded features within the game that want us to continue to play. I want to win.
My favorite feature, it has to be, it's the save button. Anytime. I remember playing Civilization, and it's like, oh, I could attack that country, or I could seek peace. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to see how I fare by attacking them.
Right.
I'm just going to bring a video quickly, but basically, like Civilization is like a world simulation of how different cultures and religion.
What a great way to learn about those world leaders.
Absolutely.
It's actually quite a tough game. Like
it is very challenging.
Like
absolutely. The save button is like imperative,
it's so
right?
important.
It is imperative. It's just like when we're using anything in Word, like about the undo button, right? And sometimes we like, even in my own life, I sometimes reflect. I'm like, I wish I had the undo button, right? Like,
if only we could all undo a certain few elements of our history. Am I right?
Absolutely, And I think another thing about these commercial games or even educational games is James Paul G, he talks about things as being good games being pleasantly frustrating, and I think that's like such a good way.
So good at scaffolding.
Yes, right. And so when I'm pleasantly frustrated, I'm motivated to learn. I'm being challenged, so it's difficult, which is what we want education to be. But I'm also wanting to solve it. So I'm happy, but I'm also frustrated at the same time. And what a great state for us to be, that I'm thinking deeply about these ideas, but I want to solve it, but I'm still being like, there's still
not at the point of frustration.
No.
You want to give up.
Absolutely.
Not bored.
Yes.
But just in that.
That's right.
Reminds me of Vygotsky, right? That
absolutely. The zone of proximal development. Absolutely. It's that scaffolding. And these games actually allow our students to be a head taller than themselves in a sense, right? So they get to think beyond maybe where they're actually at cognitively or they're situated. They actually get to think beyond themselves, which is where we want our students to be. Is they're thinking about things that maybe I wouldn't think about necessarily.
So what are some other elements of, there are, because James Paul G has done a lot of research.
Absolutely.
So,
he talks about, James Paul G, he's written quite a few books. I think I brought one.
That's up.
Anyway, he talks a lot about, he's come to the understanding that good games actually equate to good learning experiences. And so deep games like Civilization or The Sims or a lot of the commercial games that are found on the market. And so he talks about some of the things that are found within these games are certainly pleasantly frustrated is one of them. Some of the others is there's a cycle of expertise. So when I'm playing one of the levels, I start off being a novice. I don't know how to play the game. Like I'm thinking of Legend of Zelda, so when I'm playing it, I have to kind of explore the world until I kind of get all the knowledge throughout it. And then by the end of the game, or the end of the level, I should say, you've become an expert. And then when I start the next level, I'm then again a novice. And so
there's a new skill that you haven't learned yet.
Absolutely. And so it's constantly evolving. But I want to level up in the game because I'm given enough information. So G also talks about that you also are able to, things are scaffolded in a sense, so gradually released. So just in time information. So when I'm playing, the information is just given given to me in just the right time, so I'm not too frustrated. I'm not going to abandon the game, and then I'm given this information to be like, oh, I can actually play, I can continue on in the game, right?
Yeah. You're always given a chance to practice that skill and practice, and then you do, and then that skill is used, and it's important.
Yes, and I think that's like a pivotal part of many good games is they also have that sandbox at the beginning where you can just play, explore the controls, understand.
Mistakes.
Absolutely, and then when you actually get to the game or get to the expert level, you're well prepared and able to actually continue on in the game.
So it's like Oregon Trail or Math Blaster. Is that a good educational tool?
I think like Aaron talks about how they're kind of defined as like the drill and kill kind of game or drill and practice.
They're really specific. Like with when I think of multiplication, the Alberta government, the Alberta people have said we want multiplication to be a skill that comes quickly. We want multiplication facts out quickly, and so that's where that specific game comes in handy. But it doesn't teach you what an array is or how grouping works within multiplication. So it doesn't give you a deeper understanding of multiplication and how it works. It just gives you the 5 times 5 is 25. So it doesn't give
Which is still important to know.
Oh yeah, it's a very important skill.
But it's not enough.
Yeah, like Math Blasters is the most sold educational game on the market ever, the most sold. And so they've sold millions and millions of copies. And so there's obviously a reason why they've sold many copies, to introduce kids to obviously basic facts. But when you're thinking about when you're playing Math Blaster, I actually don't connect at all to the narrative that's found in the game. So Math Blaster, I could replace it with being in the future, I could put it in the past. It wouldn't actually change the structure of the game. But also when I think about it, there's nothing that's actually teaching me how to do math. It's just telling me how to memorize the facts.
Yeah.
So it's not giving me a strategy of how to actually solve the facts quicker. And so some students find these games actually really frustrating. And I remember actually playing Math Blaster when I was in grade 5 and actually getting really frustrated with the game because there was nothing in the game that was telling me how to actually do it quicker or I would just have to memorize all this knowledge in our head.
Know it.
Absolutely. And our students need to understand basic facts, of course. And so if this is a way that gets them to that point, but there's nothing in those kind of games, a lot of educational games actually teaches them those higher order thinking skills, right? How to analyze it or how to come up with their own algorithm, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I remember when I was in elementary, we had to learn typing. People don't have to learn typing anymore.
Make us teaches typing all the right types. Yes.
I remember I basically just hate it, because I'm not very good at typing. It's like, why did I learn typing? So I found a way that you're supposed to write this bank of words, and I just basically skip, and just wrote the last 2 letters. So that's like one of the ways I guess that we're just talking about.
The first video game hacks
memorize the keyboard.
Yeah, for sure.
Where naturally you're gonna learn the keyboard, which we did.
Absolutely.
You just go and just tap away now.
With my students, I had them play, I think it was called Typer Shark.
Yeah.
And you're this little guy down under the water, and the sharks were coming towards you. And you had to type the word on the shark to kill it. And I've never seen kids squeal. Too close. And they're just trying to type as fast as they can. So entertaining for me, and I hope they're able to type better now.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I know that that's right.
Yeah, they're probably typing more than... they're probably way typing faster than us anyways. So
hopefully, I imagine.
Especially nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's just kind of neat, just to think about old games like that would just I imagine a lot of schools may not need to teach typing eventually down in the future, right?
Yeah, maybe. I think it's interesting, though, also to think about the educational video games such as Math Blast or Oregon Trail that we've talked about. They haven't evolved much over the past. And I think that's interesting, too. The overall structure of these educational video games really haven't evolved that much up until, I think, this point, when we really started to, introduce in a more mass scale about programs such as Minecraft and kind of giving a revised, maybe a fresh perspective of how gaming can actually be integrated into the classroom. Because we've kind of had these drill and practice, traditionalist kind of experience that have derived from many of the educational video games on the market. But now we're kind of at this point where there's something new now, and it's very refreshing. Where it's more of a higher order thinking experience, and perhaps it'll change our perception within our classrooms of what gaming actually could potentially look like. Because games like Civilization and The Sims can be very challenging to integrate into the classroom. Oh, there it is. Shark attack.
Watch out!
Practice my typing.
Alan, don't forget the podcast. Sorry, he's just typing to kill the sharks. Thanks,
so games like this,
it's keeping us safe.
A shark exploding. it's kind of violent. I'm gonna pretend to be a parent. Like violent game. Is that an issue?
I've been really aware of that. I remember having a student back in. I think it was an article on CBC where they were talking about. I can't remember what video game it was, but they were interviewing these students who were talking about a game, and they said, well, it's not real violence because when you blow up the alien, it's blue blood, it's not red blood. And so really being a hyper aware of the content and how that works out, I really try and avoid violence in games, even in the Neverwinter Nights game that I created. It's primarily kind of a magic based and you have swords and things like that. But with my Inuit legend that I put out, I was able to equip them with bows and arrows to keep it very clean and simple. But yeah, you've got really still. It's just like watching, a
violent
PG movie.
Absolutely.
You've got to make sure that it's appropriate for your students. So.
Yeah, and I think for us as educators, introducing more game construction programs, it kind of takes away that violence aspect, right? Where, or you just restrict it. I know in Kodu there is objects where students can use like, there could be shooting, but the shooting is like rainbow color and whatnot. So does that change it? I'm not sure. It's still the act, but then again, as the teacher, you can kind of restrict that. Well, that's not the kind of games we're using. In my experience, when we've used Kodu and to restrict that whole violent aspect, we had our students recreate the War of 1812. And so the only time that they could actually create these games was unless they could find a purposeful way to use it. So there wasn't just to use this weapon use this gun or use this ammunition for whatever reason. They actually had to use it for purposeful ways. And so they were like, oh, okay. And then in the game, there's actually these missiles. And I'm like, well, that didn't exist back in the 1800s, so you can't use that. And so having those conversations of authenticity perhaps can be situated within game construction. But there certainly is a worry about violence in video games. And is there a causal effect? If I play violent video games, will I then have maybe more violent tendencies?
This is not a new conversation either. We've had media, there have been studies for 50, 60 years and beyond, whether it's, whether movies, violent movies make violent people, violent television, and now, all sorts of media in different forms.
For sure.
Will it turn people violent?
Yeah,
and I think, that the research has been a little bit mixed. Music, who remembers, Alice Cooper and Marilyn Manson, and they caused this person to go harm that person or harm themselves or so on, and it's not a new debate.
No.
It is certainly an emotional one, and it's the latest that I've read is that the video games don't actually make you violent. That some people with violent tendencies may be drawn to certain types of games.
Absolutely.
I've even read research which suggests that it actually lowers the amount of violence. Where violent movies actually lowers the amount of real violence we've seen. Whether it's a fix somebody gets, or we're not really sure what it is.
Absolutely. And the research that I've also read about violence in video games is certainly mixed, and so it depends on which side of the perspective you see. But the research I've read is that children or youth or adults are drawn to violent video games because they're often more, the graphics are better or the storyline is better. And so it's not necessarily the violence in the video games that they're drawn to, it's that the actual story plan and the actual game experience that comes from it. So it's not necessarily being violent in itself, but just the quality of the video game is exceptional. So they want to play this game because it is such an exceptional video games. I've also read that they actually, when students are playing these kind of games, maybe they also experience a moral lesson that no, actually that is wrong, and I don't want that to actually happen. So there definitely is a mixed bag when it comes to violence in games.
When I think about the video game Third World Farmer, and that's a great one where you talk about choices, because it's if you get a chance to play Third World Farmer, it's a web-based game, and I think one of the most important things I've run it with say grade 6 students, junior high school. I've run it with my university students, and it's really interesting because the number one thing I get out of it is everyone's going, this game's not fair. Like, you just can't win at it. It's like, well, guess what? Absolutely. Being a third world farmer, it's not fair.
Yeah.
And some of the choices that they have to make are, your crops have failed. You've gone into debt. Well, there's a paramilitary group that would like to set up, on your farm, and they're willing to pay you X number of dollars.
Absolutely.
It's like, okay, well, I can support this paramilitary group, or I can plant poppies for opium. or I can do the right thing and say no, and my family will starve.
Absolutely.
So it's great to bring your students to those moral dilemmas and have them discuss that as well.
Yeah, and I think that really builds. And I know a great game site is called gamesforchange.org.
Yes.
And those kind of game experiences are found within, and they actually have really nicely structured with a website where they have like grade levels and social justice topics. And so if you're talking about a certain conversation in your classroom, this is a great place to find an excellent game that really does teach them about something, some sort of ethical topic within our world.
Yeah.
And I know that even in my experience with these kind of games is also presenting short games. We call them not games. So kind of like a reflective narrative aspect that teaches the students something about a game, but in a very short period of time. And it's more of a narrative. There's more of a narrative drawn throughout the game. And so I know one of them was played, it's called Icarus Needs. And it's this, he kind of travels throughout this world, and he's in a dream state, and he kind of travels throughout his dream, and he has to make ethical decisions about what is he actually going to do, or what kind of decisions does he make. And great short game, takes 5 minutes to play, and teaches the kids.
Speaking about like ethical and morals and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Being that we're a Catholic school, way to put a plug in. But basically, you think like, since we're already teaching about Jesus' teachings essentially about doing the right thing for us and for any other people, do you think that's kind of helped with the tendency of like violence games that we get teaching our students that way?
Well, I think, one of the themes you hear over and over again, whether, Aaron was talking about earlier, or, some of the research that's out there, certainly you hear about those teachable moments and having conversation. And obviously every parent has got to be comfortable with what they're exposing their child to. Every teacher's got to be comfortable with what's being brought into their classroom. But it's the conversation that happens with it, I think, that is really important. And, there is a lot of advice out there from experts to suggest that play the video games that your kids are playing. If you're a parent, have conversations with them. Make your best decisions as to what you're comfortable exposing them to or not exposing them to. And even in certain situations that some might consider to be questionable or borderline, there's still a lesson to be learned and a moral value that we can come back to our Catholic teachings with. And those are sometimes very real conversations because it's what coming into our kids' lives in real situations that they encounter, whether it's a news story they've seen the previous night or something that they're encountering in a short film or a video game that they're playing or that they're making.
Absolutely.
I think that conversation is so important.
Absolutely.
Speaking of which, I want to point us out on, if you can hit the screen, there's a great site that I encourage parents and teachers, for that matter, to visit. It's called, it's on the Center on Media and Child Health, Dr. Michael Rich, who calls himself the Mediatrician. He's got a very interesting background both in the film and TV industry as well as being a pediatrician. And there are some great tips for parents in a whole bunch of different areas. Under parents, there's a section called Ask the Mediatrician, and all sorts of questions and around various media types are given. There's even a section for educators. So it's a great site to
I'm going to go there right now.
To visit. Yeah, go there.
Be back in 5
after
minutes.
the show.
Oh, great.
Cool.
So certainly an important thing to seek out expert advice. And as teachers, we all have to be comfortable bringing in and various content and learning activities into our classrooms that fit with us and our teaching styles as well.
Yeah, and I think that it's a balance, right? So we wouldn't want our students to play video games all the time. We don't want them to be in front of a screen all the time. And I think that Mediatrician, when I listen to him, he talks about a digital Sabbath, if I'm not mistaken. And he talks about where we actually need to have moments in our lives where we actually do shut down, and these games are actually shut down, and we do other things within our schools. And so I know at H-Braille we wanted to plan a day where we shut down all technology and we kind of experience a day without, and so it's a Sabbath in a sense, right?
Yeah.
It's a pause. And maybe we appreciate the tools that we actually are using, we appreciate the games more, or maybe we realize that perhaps I don't need to use these as much as I do. So yeah, so creating these balances within our lives I think is really a nice reflective point.
I like that.
Yeah, digital Sabbath, that was really struck me from that conversation.
And that balance, that sense of balance.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
for sure.
Well, we are almost out of time, and so...
yeah, I think we need a part 2 next time, so...
Yeah, we're only getting started, and I'm sure this is, helps all of us, while we don't have all the answers, it's certainly important to talk about a lot of the issues. And I think what we've seen here is that there is certainly a lot of potential in terms of student engagement.
Absolutely.
And while, what helps me when I think about this is because on the one side, we hear about how very important that teacher is and the role of the teacher is in the class, and how the skill and action of that teacher really helps determine whether learning happens with our children or not. At the same time, we're hearing on the other side about how we're moving towards a more student-centered, student-driven, student choice and voice. And so how do those two fit together? And we heard Paul earlier talk about his ability to pause that lesson and be that activator of learning and shift things around, and Candace designing projects and with your students and so on. And it really helps make sense for me. So
absolutely.
Alan, you want to get the final word in?
I think it's like students are just very interested in just playing video games. So I think that we adults and as educators, we just have to kind of embrace it. Don't shut them out, right? Well, pretty important for them.
Thank you, Alan, for allowing us to be a part of the conversation. Happy birthday.
Thanks.
Have a great day. And I want to thank Tristan and Riley off camera. Thank you, gentlemen, for your good luck with your video game design. Paul McNeely, thank you very much. Good luck with the Minecraft project and Kodu.
Yeah, so exciting.
Thank you, Aaron Ball, for being here and providing us with some laughs and obviously some great information, and Candace with your research and all the amazing things you're doing here at HE Barrow. We thank you very much, and thank you all for watching, and really appreciate being a part of this episode. Stay tuned for more shows, and thank you to our guests on the show.